I'll start here. Thanks very much, colleagues. I have the pleasure of speaking with Joe Casio from George Washington University, and he and I are on a committee that is trying to develop a U.S. position for an international standard for sustainable development in communities. So I'm going to let Joe talk, and Joe, you can also tell me where on the web you want me to go. So it's your airplane at the moment, Joe. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your
Okay.
interest, and why you cast the ballot the way you did a few weeks ago.
Okay. Just quickly by way of background, I am a visiting scholar at George Washington University. I've been here for 2 years. My background is primarily industry. I was at IBM for 26 years. I was at Booz Allen Hamilton for 18 years, and so my specialty happens to be environmental management and environmental management systems. I got my start in standards and standardization in 1991 when I became the head of the U.S. delegation that negotiated the ISO 14000 series of standards on environmental management. And essentially, since 1991, most of my career has devolved around international standardization, and the way I make my living, I have been making my living up until recently, was essentially as a consultant on environmental management systems, the ISO 14000, and particularly the ISO 14001, which is the organizational management system that organizations implement in order to address their environmental issues. So 2 years ago, I got an invitation to come to George Washington University as a visiting scholar. And when I got here, in discussing my role with another professor that is the lead professor here for environmental and energy program in the School of Engineering and Applied Science, we decided that we would start an institute. And the purpose and the concept of the institute relates very nicely to standards and standardization. The concept of the institute is that we would educate and advocate and promote non-regulatory approaches to environmental and energy management, okay, and environmental and energy management issues and sustainability in general. But particularly the areas that we're focusing on are environmental management, energy management, greenhouse gas management, green products, green cities, green data centers, green non-regulatory policy development, and water. We've added water as an addition because there's so much activity in the area of water that we found it convenient to add that and useful actually, because there's actually quite a few grants that are available in that subject. So anyway, so we did that to round out our focus areas. So the institute has been chartered by the university. We are an institute that cuts across all the schools at the university, so we're not just bound to the School of Engineering, and we have an advisory board, and we have internal affiliates, external affiliates. We have people, professors who are leaders in each one of the areas that I mentioned before. So we're making some progress. We have some nice grants that we've received, so we have some funding. It's never enough, obviously, but we have some funding to do at least to start some of the work that we're trying to do.
Yeah, so Joe, there's a couple things I think are noteworthy to our audience. One is that you mentioned the word non-regulatory,
Right.
and that's something that we try to. In fact, I've even tried to emphasize that today when I brought to our industry's attention a document that deals with confined space entry and work. And I say it this way, and I know you're of like mind here, is that up until the National Technology Transfer Advancement Act, most of our industry was kind of guided by top-down regulation. But come 1997, when the NTTAA came into effect, now it enabled bottom-up innovation. And that's a big cultural difference in our industry. We find that a lot of the middle 1990s workforce is still there, and they're still waiting for something to come down from government. Whereas, as you know, as you well know, that there are other faster, probably more effective solutions to that. So I just thought I wanted to bring that to the attention of our listeners here.
Very good, very good. That's totally correct, and that's essentially the raison d'etre for our institute, is to promote that kind of bottom-up approach, and to in terms of the students, in terms of education, is to let our students know about this. You know, because many of them are not aware, and we believe that making our students aware of that is very important.
Well, that still plays into what I'm saying. So you're even adding to my argument, which is that a lot of the students are not aware of it, because much of the workforce that are in position of power right now are of the middle 90s, heavy regulatory. I guess I'm pointing out specifically OSHA and EPA, but the general sentiment, the pre-NTTA sentiment, most of the leaders right now grew up in their careers thinking that everything has to come from government, and especially in the education industry, where there's a very complicated relationship, as you know. So that's why we have to really approach the younger people, because they're not burdened with some of the baggage of the and I guess, I might include myself as one of them, so I guess, since having been here for 33 years, but it does strike me that the educational component is where we have to go, because I frankly have lost any hope that I can get anybody who's in a nice, comfortable career to change in any fashion. There's simply not enough money in it to change. So that's a little more draconian way of saying it. But go ahead.
No, I totally agree with everything you've just said. Again, just to very quickly state that we are obviously doing what we said we were going to do with the institute, and in particular, right now we are creating and will soon announce a certificate program for greenhouse gas management. That, again, a totally voluntary kind of program based on standards and primarily based on the ISO 14064-65 standards that the same committee TC207 has developed, the same committee that developed the 14001. In any case, so we're doing that. I am scheduled next year to teach a course that's based on the ISO 14001 and 15001, which is energy management. The course essentially teaches students how to create systems in organizations that are based on the ISO 14001 and 50001 standards. I am also under a grant from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, developing a new course that focuses entirely on the whole area of standardization and standards, and it covers ISO and IEC and ANSI and ASTM and how we achieve consensus and international standards and all those kinds of things, including conformity assessment, which is how organizations.
I have been active with 50,001. Actually, I was actually in Geneva on the day they released it, and Trevor Weiss, who was who's a project leader at the ISO, he actually gave me a watermark copy of that. So I hastened that to the IECC 2015 committee, and I put it out there. I said, you're called the International Energy Conservation Code. Why don't you at least reference it? Reference a international standard, since you are the International Energy Conservation Code. They wouldn't go for it, and they didn't go for it because it's largely a performance document. If you go to, and I believe it's like chapter 4, they say that essentially, and being a technical man, basically we show a rate of change, set your benchmark for rate of change, the first derivative, so to say, and that will be your performance standard. So every industry, every organization can set their own performance standard, which is realistic to theirs. But because the IECC adopts by reference much of what's ASHRAE 90.1, they didn't want to accommodate. Performance measures, and a lot of that is complicated by the enforcement interest. The enforcement wants to have things to. The enforcement comes armed with their checklists and stuff, and so that's what you run into there. So there's a cultural divergence. Maybe you can speak a little bit more than I can with more authority, even though I'm there quite a bit.
Well, no, you're
How
right.
does the European, the most of the world, well, let's not say most of the world, but there's a preference. I think it's universally agreed that performance standards are more appropriate and fair. But in the United States, prescriptive energy standards, codes, seem to be dominate the market. What are your
Uh,
thoughts on that?
well, first of all, you refer to the 50001 and standards like that as performance standards. I usually refer to them as process standards. That they don't prescribe specific levels of performance, and that's the 14001. Classically, the 14001, the EPA objected to the 14001 originally, not anymore, but originally in 1996 they objected to it because it didn't specify any particular performance levels. I mean, the organization could set its own performance. It was a process standard, which means that the organization created a process for managing their environmental issues, and it was up to them to. Now, there was an assumption that at the very least the performance would be in line with compliance to regulations. So that was we all considered that to be the bottom line, the floor, if you will, on performance. But then the organization could set its own performance levels, so the environmental community, the EPA, had a little bit of heartburn on that. But they've come around. They've recognized that performance standards have a role, and we always said that that process standards always have a role, and that we always said that they were complementary to the performance requirements anyway. It wasn't like we were saying, have a process and it doesn't matter what your performance level is. We said have a process and make sure that you incorporate in that process the performance levels that at least are required by the law, and then anything else you want to include. That if you want to go beyond, that's fine. Of course it's fine. It's desired, but that we were dealing with process standards, and so anyway, maybe does that ring a bell with you? I mean, is that?
Yes, it does. I know the exact paragraph. I pulled it out, and I actually had talked to one of my colleagues, Joe Andre, who's actually the IECC committee. So in general, you're describing it with a little bit more nuance, and my objective is to not necessarily. Principally, we want to make things safer, simpler, lower cost, longer lasting. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I work in little small pieces of things, and to get the notion, just the idea that an industry or an academic department or an enterprise like the healthcare industry within our industry could set its own benchmarks unmoored, or I'd say unmoored from federal regulations, that the states then come in to come to enforce. That's still a straight. I had no illusion that I was going to get that passed, but I do think that we might have reached the point of diminishing returns with with prescriptive standards. I think a lot of the low-hanging fruit,
Right.
I think I'll let you see when people ask me and they say, well, what are you talking about streaming regulation, Mike? I says, well, you wanted open government. Well, okay, so now you get to have the burdens of the happiness of somebody who got what they wished for. So let me just show you what ASHRAE looks like. Here's what now comes ASHRAE 90.1, and if you want to know what streaming regulation looks like, this just came in over the transom. Look at all these addenda.
Mm.
Look at
Mm-hmm.
all these addenda. You can show your students this, okay? So you'll pick
Yeah.
up, you usually have about 30 calendar days to respond to this. So if I pick one here, let's just say, looks like addendum B1. It looks like ASHRAE wants to do something with computer room air conditioners. So they're not quite to the point where they're going to wire up every breath you take, but we're tracking that way. So here you have a number of let's see, where's the strike and bold on this? And here, a bunch of. So here's a bunch of new stuff that's starting to prescribe in great. That's almost as nutty about measurements as NIST is.
Mm-hmm.
So looky here. This is what streaming regulation looks like, folks. And they come at us. Now they're under continuous maintenance, and to be fair, I would argue that an organization that does energy management does not necessarily have to be on the footing of a continuous maintenance because it's not public safety. But here we go again. Now we're going to be managing and regulating fan speed control. This is going on a near hourly basis. So when I ask the question, whatever happened to the discretion of the design engineer? Whatever happened to being self-accountable? And that's not an issue, I think, in the environment. But there is hope because, as you know, that the bottom up, and that's one of the reasons we have Joe coming in here on Friday. It's to explain to explain to the culture of our industry, as I say right here, that the next stage. We often talk about open government, and this is what participatory democracy is going to be about. But these folks here in the middle 90s, I don't think they're going to change. I don't think they're aligned to it. And I'm carrying baggage also. But I know, and you and I are close to young people. We like being around young people. You can live your whole life in your 20s here, actually. That you can. They're the hope for trying to get this right for the United States and the world.
Yes, absolutely. Let me jump because we only have 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
Let me jump to the Green Cities, TC 268 and all that.
Is there a place you want me to? I can pull it up. I'm not sure how much I can show, but maybe do you just want to speak extemporaneously on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just reiterate why I voted against that 37101 because they characterized it as a management a management system standard basically, and having in mind the fact that management system standards tend to be requirement standards, like the 14,001, the 50,001 on energy, 14,001 obviously on environment, the one that's going to come out pretty soon, 45,001 on occupational health and safety. These are requirement standards that have a lot of shall clauses, meaning that if you want to be in conformity, if you want to be found to be in conformity with the standard, you have to actually do what the standard prescribes. And these management standards are process standards that set up a structure, a structure that includes an analysis of the conditions and the issues, a determination of where the organization wants to be heading, setting objectives and targets, setting in place operational controls to achieve those objectives and targets, setting in place operational controls to achieve compliance where compliance is an issue. In many cases, it is an issue. So I'm looking at the 37101, and I'm trying to find all these elements that that we have repeated in all of these management system standards requirements documents. Okay, and I'm not seeing any of them in 37101. It's not that it's not a worthwhile document. It just didn't fit the description of a management system standard in accordance with the other management system standards that we have produced in ISO. Okay. So that was my complaint basically.
Now that I know your background in the early '90s dealing with the 14,000 suite, now I understand your vote.
Mm-hmm.
Management standards are notorious for being how do we say they can be difficult. They're subtle, and as my colleague Stan Mitchell from Scotland says, nobody can really quite put their finger on what good management is. You know it when you see it. It's sort of like going to a hotel and you're in an atmosphere where everything is easy and efficient. I don't know if you have the same experience that I have, is that I married a North European. My wife is Denmark, the Netherlands. Whenever you go into a European city, whether it's a matter of proportion or scale or the way they stylize, but you always have a sense in the European cities that things are about 10 to 20% closer to what's appropriate. Let me say that again. I think America carries a lot, and I mentioned this specifically with cities, because there's almost an intuitive sense that we can do a better job with your cities, especially if you've been back and forth between Europe and America, as I have, as you have. That they seem to attend to certain characteristics of cities, whether it's the width of the roads, the way the infrastructure is wired, the way traffic is controlled, but they are more attentive to that. And I think largely it's because they have the labor material trade-off that we didn't. So we tend to be a little excessive. And that's why I believe that it's likely that, as you say, the management standards, I think, speak to that intuitive sense that I have, but I obviously am not as qualified as you are because I haven't been on the front line of what management standards are. But I hear this story over and over again, especially with respect to what's going on at ISO. And I'm going to apologize if I'm not, I know Trevor and I know Jose and I know Elizabeth and all of them down there. It is respectful of the fact that what the Europeans do. In fact, as a matter of fact, I even tweeted that today. And the Austrians like what I had to say about that one. It says, I think that the Europeans have an economic advantage simply because they talk to each other through standardization processes. And if I can get Twitter to respond here, you'll see what I had to say about it. It's just a very small tweet. But standardization processes, and I hate to use that, I hate to use the word process. I often like to call it leading practice discovery, but what did I say here? So here we are. European nations, so this is what the Austrians did. So my answer was European nations add 0.5% to their gross domestic product by simply talking to each other. When you go to Germany, all those industries, the government makes, of course they're funding DIN, but they're talking to each other and they're talking to people who don't agree with each other and they come to an agreement. That's I think what Europeans are able to bring, and you sense that in their cities, even though it's slow.
Yeah.
And so I think I've talked a little bit more, but it's something dear to my heart. And that's one of the reasons why I've steered our industry toward its engagement and advocacy in the standard. Just to be fair to people here, while I pick through and let people see what my vote was and explain it a little bit, why don't you talk a little bit, and then I guess I found it easier.
Even more fundamental, I just want to add one more word to what you just said about the contrast between the United States and Europe. Even more fundamental than I agree that the fact that they talk to each other is very important. But to me, even more fundamental is the fact that in Europe, cities are considered good things. People live in cities. To be a citizen, to be in the even in the Roman times, to be in the city, so was contrasted to being on the farm, to being in agriculture and all that, and to be in the city was always considered desirable. In the United States, it's the other way around. From our very foundation, the people in this country distrusted cities. They thought that the true American, the true virtues of being of America were on the farm, in the rustic areas, not in the cities. Americans distrusted cities and fundamentally hated cities. So that goes to the foundation, I think, fundamental.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point, because it turns out my wife grew up on a farm in Europe, and that's exactly correct. I'll confirm that. I'll also confirm that the Marlboro Man, you see the magazine articles with his cigarettes and is on his horse. He was actually meddling a little bit in the federal government there. He had his lobbyists back then, and they were bickering with the what's that movie? Is it Oklahoma? That musical's all about how the farmers and the ranchers weren't getting along so very well, so they each employed their lobbyists. So even the Marlboro Man had a lobbyist meddling with the federal government because to keep his land. Hey, look, maybe that's a good anecdote to end up. I don't think I have a noteworthy. As I said, I might have said is that I felt that I wanted to keep since this is the University of Michigan ballot. It looks like this was sent through here. College towns are cities within cities, and we wanted to keep the discussion going. We didn't want to shut the door. And I suppose had the vote been closer, I probably would have had to think a little bit harder. But because it looks like mine, there's only one other affirmative vote on this one. It was largely informed by the desire to show the Europeans that we understand, we're receptive to their point of view. and I didn't want them because the education industry stretches across all, across the globe. That and even though cities are not as much, campuses are not as much cities within. Well, actually, they are. A lot of those campuses, like Leiden, for example, they are integrated within the city, but they're not set apart here. So that's the reason. I don't want to. It's like both of us are kind of constrained on time here.
By the way, just very, very quick word.
Yeah.
I happen to be European myself. I came to this country from Europe, so I spent the first 10 years of my life in Europe.
Oh, okay.
So,
What part of Europe?
I was in Italy. Yeah, my name is pronounced Cascio because it's the SC sound in Italian is a sh sound. So that's
Oh, the Italians are great friends. They're always, I think they're they're always retweeting our stuff. I like that. And actually, I have a colleague at Sapienza. I run this other committee. I don't do it by myself, of course, but we've been very. I am collaborating. We're actually planning on having right here at Sapienza. I'm not sure. What part of Italy were you from? Did you say?
I was born in Sicily, so I'm
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. So you understand. So you're sympathetic to that. So you're kind of like the right man for this job. Well, look, Joe, frankly, I have to get ready for ANSI
Yes.
coming. This is live stream, as you know, and you're welcome to call in. I'm sure we wanted to make it easy for people to call in, so you don't have to log in or provide anything like that. Had we done that, Joe would have been able to address you directly, but we seem to have gotten a better part of 1,000 hits on the live stream. So you should, on Friday, you should see this window start to fill up. And
Good. Thank you.
okay, well, look, Joe, I will see you. I'll probably call afterward, then we'll wait for the next meeting. And yeah, take care and good luck.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Nice talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.